You've got big projects to tackle, but your day gets swallowed up by repetitive tasks and constant inquiries. It's hard to make progress when you're stuck putting out fires. That's where Element 451's AI assistants come in. Acting like an extra set of hands, you get your time back for the high-impact projects. Ready to reclaim your time? Visit element451.com/AI team to learn more.
I'm a higher ed social media manager, and I have a confession. The only schools I've ever worked for are in Cambridge, Massachusetts. So, how does one go from a university in Ireland to a university in Saudi Arabia and be equally as successful? Tony Sheridan is the marketing and communications manager for the King Abdullah University of Science and Technology in Saudi Arabia, and I have some questions for him. Welcome to Confessions of a Higher Ed Social Media Manager, a podcast that addresses the do's, don'ts, and dynamics of the digital ecosystem specific to higher education. I'm your host, Jenny Lee Fowler. Join me every other week for discussions with some of the best minds in higher education social media management and marketing. Confessions of a Higher Ed Social Media Manager is a part of the Enrollify Network, a robust collection of podcasts designed to help higher education professionals like you grow. Explore our other shows at enrollify.org or check out some of my personal favorites linked in the show notes below. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com. Hello, Mr. Tony Sheridan. I am delighted to have you on the podcast. Welcome.
Thank you. It's great to finally get on. Long-time listener, first-time caller. I love the show. I've listened to every single episode. And
I love that. Thank you.
yeah, and it's great to connect with you on this and talk social, something I love talking about.
Yeah. I'm super excited to have you on.
Can I ask, am I the first person you've had on from Saudi Arabia? I know the answer because I've listened to every episode.
Yes. And you certainly have a fascinating story, which is part of the reason why I wanted to have you on the podcast. But Tony, my first question is, take us to that moment, when you decided, like, I am going to take this job at the King Abdullah University of Science and Technology and move from Ireland to Saudi Arabia.
Of course, but let's just say King Abdullah University of Science and Technology. We can call it KAUST from now
Very
on,
good.
the acronym. But to take you back, I'll have to take you back to summer 2020. I'm in the back seat of my sister's car and I get a notification on LinkedIn that just pops up on my phone, and it's a recruiter from KAUST. And I can see that the job is like digital campaigns or something. And without even clicking into it, I said to my sister, I'm moving to Saudi Arabia. Something just clicked and I knew that it was going to be the right decision. Now, to give you like context, what makes it even funnier is that at that time I was leading social media and digital content at University of Limerick in the Central Marcoms department for 4 years, but I had been at University of Limerick for 15 years, a decade and a half at the same university. I'd done my undergraduate there, went straight into working there. So I was there 11 years on the staff end of things. So I was probably not a very likely person to just up sticks and move, to a new continent. I was a bit institutionalized, but really, I was working on some really cool stuff there on social. I had an amazing manager. Her name is Sheena Doyle. She's been promoted to head of external comms there. But we really pushed boundaries, tried new things. We did Snapchat. We got the Best Snapchat in Ireland award up against all the other organizations. Then Snapchat kind of died. We went into Instagram heavy, won Best Instagram in Ireland. Then TikTok. I was on TikTok, won Best TikTok in Ireland. And even I mean, at that stage, yeah, okay, we won national awards in Ireland, but actually there was people in the industry all around the world were picking up on the work that I was doing there. And this was like low budget. We had some great student social media officers, but kind of team of one and a great manager supporting me. Even TikTok reached out to the university, which was like a real career highlight. DM'd us on Twitter because you couldn't DM on TikTok at the time, I believe, which is
Amazing.
funny. And they said, "Who's running your TikTok account?" And I was like, "That's me, the same person that runs all the social accounts." And they're like, "It's one of the most engaged TikTok accounts in the world on in higher ed, not in the not like against other brands, but." And
I
they
get you.
asked me to like speak at a conference with them. So I was getting all of this kind of recognition, was doing great things. Because I was allowed to and was given that freedom. And I remember we had an award success, and in summer 2019, I was at the award ceremony with my manager, Sheena, and she had kind of turned to me and she said, "I think you're going to have to leave." And I was like, "What? The venue? Have I embarrassed it?" She's like, "No, I think you're going to have to go to it and somewhere else." And I said, "I've been at UL, University of Limerick, for so long. um, you know, am I not doing well?" She goes, "No, you're doing too well." She goes, "I can't, like an amazing manager would, because she cared about me as a person and my development." She said, "You need to spread your wings. This is public sector Ireland. Social at that time, we had fought to get it as a full time job at all. So the idea that there would be a more senior thing in social, but social was booming around the world, and she just knew that there was other things out there now." So I started looking. I actually only had, in terms of qualifications, a woodwork teaching degree. That was my undergrad in the University of Limerick, which is a whole other story. But I started doing a master's in marketing. So I was like, well, if I'm going to move, somebody's going to want me to have a qualification. These are universities, after all. I only wanted to work in universities, higher ed for life for me, right? And
Mhm.
so that's the context that when that message came in summer 2020, I was primed at this idea because I had a manager that was encouraging me to spread my wings. Now, I said I absolutely knew it was the right decision without even clicking into that message, but that's not the same as I didn't know that I'd be any good at it. I didn't know that when I went there I could deliver. I just knew that it was worth giving it a shot. I said if I hate it, I can come back after a year. I'll have international experience and have had an adventure, and that was enough for me to go just up sticks and do it. Now, I've been there 3.5 years. I've loved it. I've been able to work with an amazing team to lead work that's taken home, I think, 12 international awards at the top level for what we've done. And so, yeah, it was definitely the right decision, I think.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Can we just take a moment for your supervisor? I like a round of applause. We all
Yeah.
want bosses like that let us, that grow us and help us reach our potential. And when it's beyond, when we've grown past our previous positions, I think that's lovely.
I mean, I owe my whole career to her, to be honest, because I was did a woodwork teaching degree. I was in the university doing a PhD that I later dropped out of. And my part time job was in student engagement. I was leading an initiative supporting new students and just so personally interested in social media and the power of it. I was a director of a charity, a mental health charity in Limerick, in Ireland. And I was using social there because, in a charity, you can experiment with it, right? You can try it out. And I was then bringing it into my work in student engagements and support, which was my part time job while kind of not doing the PhD I was meant to be doing. And this lady, Sheena Doyle, like saw the potential in me and took a chance on me. And she gave me that initial opportunity, which is a great manager. Then importantly, like opportunities to try and test things within the role, right? We need that as well. And then when you've
So
maxed it
good.
out, the opportunity to say, I love having you on the team, but I care about you more as a person, and maybe it's time to look for something else. So yeah, big round
So
of
good.
applause to
Yeah.
her.
So good. So you pack up, you go to Saudi Arabia. Islam is the official religion of the country. Now, how does that impact your social strategy, if at all? I mean, I feel like this is a total mind shift, but maybe it isn't. I don't know.
Right. Yeah. I guess one, I'm still working at a university. Two, it's an international university. English is the language of the university. So all that helps. And then, to say KAUST, it's one of the world's leading STEM universities. It's the number one university in the Arab world. It's got the best labs of any university in the world. It's got the highest cited professors in the world. I think we got that 8 years in a row. Only university in the world with our name on a Formula One car. Last night we won the Gordon Bell Prize for high performance computing. It's like the Nobel in that area. So, and last year we launched like a new strategy for the university about really taking the amazing research at the university and transforming it into economic and societal impact. So look, those are the things that at the core influence the social strategy, right? It's a university and all of those things. Now, to go directly to the question around Islam, uh, to preempt this, I'm white, Irish, raised Catholic. I'm not,
Yes. Yes.
Arab, Muslim. I'm not Saudi, so I'm not the spokesperson on this. But I have lived here for 3.5 years. I'm embedded in it. Islam is like, I think, 1/4 of the world's population. It's 2 billion people around the world. It's pluralistic. There's a lot of different interpretations of it, right? So Saudi culture and the culture of the country is definitely influence the way you approach business strategy or a university, right? And of course, Saudi being the birthplace of Islam is intertwined, right? But I think Saudi culture and societal norms had certainly in the past a really big impact on the social strategy. And how that manifested itself was this university has been open only for 15 years. I would say for nearly the first 10 years, they didn't do a lot of storytelling visually of what was happening inside the university. Okay, why? Because we were the first mixed gender university in the country. And Saudi Arabia, maybe people don't know this, but since the new Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, let's say 2018, 2019, a lot of social reforms and changes had been happening. But pre that, it was women weren't as much in the workplace. Women weren't shown in advertising. So around the time that I was hired, the whole country had started to change and open up. MBS, the Crown Prince, had called it a return because Saudi was like this,
Mm-hmm.
like pre
Mm-hmm.
pre 1979, I think. So it was a return to this more moderate, open Islam, as he described it, and so that meant that here was stories that just weren't being told. Here is the first mixed gender university in Saudi Arabia. We have, I think, 39% female graduates. Considering that we're science and tech and graduate only, that is like a really, really high percentage. But even in the
Mm-hmm.
country, 51% of university graduates in Saudi Arabia are female. So I don't think that's the perception that there would have been worldwide. And because those stories weren't being told, this was a national thing to say we're going to open up for tourism. We want people to see that it's actually a very welcoming, much more open culture. And that just opened the gates for the university to change its strategy and say, okay, boom, do storytelling. Take these, let's say, lesser told or underrepresented stories and just do them. And just at that time, I was coming in, and it was an amazing experience to have these doors open and say, yeah, heck yeah, I want to tell stories that have never been told before. Who doesn't want to do that?
Yeah, several years ago, I think right around the time that you started, KAUST heavily recruited for talent at MIT. So, I know it's a similar talent pool and level, right, of faculty and staff and students. So it sounds like they were opening up.
Right, yeah. A lot of our PhD students come having done undergrads at MIT. A lot of our PhD students leave and do postdocs at MIT or, other similar top universities around the world. But one point I'll pick up on that you said about like whether it was this massive change. I would say to anyone that's listening that's thinking of making a big career change, like it could be even within the States. You go from California to New York, right? There's a big culture difference there. Going from Ireland to Saudi Arabia, the first tactic that I had was to look for the similarities. And and this is a good point that you pick up, you travel a lot to see differences, those people that want to see the world, but it also teaches you that human nature, people are people, right? And it
Mm-hmm.
connects us, right? So it was great for me to just say, okay, my colleague Abdullah, when him and I are having tea in the morning, we're talking about the same things as I talked about with my colleague Paddy in Ireland, right? It's about, the kids kept them up, or how's his wife doing in work. And, people are people. And that really helped me personally to like fit in and make those connections. But professionally, I very quickly realized that the skills that I had developed in storytelling in Ireland were going to work in Saudi Arabia too, because storytelling, the key base principles are just the same. They're just the same. What gets people's attention and holds it, what entertains, informs, it was the same. So people are people. That's really important. Yes, there are differences, and those differences can matter. And that's just where you need people within the organization to, at certain points in your work, check and input and input their voices so that your blind spots are, accounted for within the process. To avoid any pitfalls. But people are people, and that's a really empowering thing. If you're going to
Mm-hmm.
change or move to a new institution, if I can go from Ireland to Saudi Arabia and just thrive, I think anyone can really do it. It's much less scary in reality than it is in your head.
People Are People, one of my favorite Depeche Mode songs. And there's also real wisdom in what you said, Tony. That was beautiful. So how do you approach your social strategy and storytelling? I guess you've just said that you've took a lot of the same principles that you learned in Ireland and use them in Saudi, but how do you use it? How do you ensure women's voices are heard authentically?
Right. So I think the key thing to start with is that KAUST is this mixed gender university. It's naturally diverse, inclusive environment. So what I saw was we really just need to capture that, right? We just need to tell the stories that exist. We don't need to force it. But even with that being the case, it wasn't necessarily happening. So I inherited, when I had just started, a faculty campaign from someone that was just two people actually in the department that were leaving. And what I got was that they had done a photo shoot and they had done some video interviews with 12 professors. They had selected 11 men and one woman. Now, considering that we are a diverse organization, we have a load of amazing female faculty, this was quite a strange decision. And I had asked, why did we have, this one female professor? And they said, oh, well, originally it was 12 men. So we thought, we best put one in. And so I
Oh,
thought,
gee.
yeah, I was like, wow, well, you were so close to understanding how to, that there was something wrong here. But basically, the campaign went out, and I couldn't go back and change it. And the tagline for the campaign was Meet the pioneering faculty at one of the world's leading STEM universities, tackling global challenges. And one tweet roasted us saying, tackling global challenges apart from diversity, because there was
Yeah.
11 men and one woman in the photo. So we had left ourselves wide open to this criticism. And I kind of cried, and then I laughed and I said, okay, how do I fix this? And the let's say the sponsor of the campaign was an amazing guy, the provost, but like second in command of the university, so busy. And my meeting to pitch the next campaign with him was 15 minutes long. So how do I explain, like, that we can't do this and get the budget and all of these things? So I came up, and I also didn't want to tell him, what to do. I wanted to align to something. So this is where I had this idea of campaign strategy pillars. Now you could call this whatever, right? But I just wanted it to kind of sound formal or fancy. I literally just wrote down 12 things that I wanted my next campaign to be. I wanted it to be human. I wanted it to be diverse. I wanted it to be representative, authentic, inclusive, considerate in how much time we took of the professors. I wanted it to be organized. I wanted it to be ambitious. So I wrote down these things. I called them my strategy pillars. And I went into that like 15-minute meeting, and I had this list. And again, it was a list of men. And I said, why do we have a list of men? He said, well, they're the highest cited. So I was like, okay, well, that's one way to approach the campaign, but we don't have to do the most cited professors. And because okay, we could value the citations, and we do as a university, but I said in the campaign, I want to tell more stories. I want to align to our campaign strategy pillars. If I do that, it's not representative of our faculty, it's not inclusive. And so he's like, okay, cool. Yeah, I get it. Within 1 second, he gets it. And I also then tell the story of how would you feel? You see this tweet goes out and we kind of get roasted. And he says, okay, I see the need. So on the back of that, I switched it up. I said, let's have a mix of faculty, let's have male and female. And then that gave me the leverage that he had engaged with that strategy to just apply that across the board in different campaigns we did. So if it was a student campaign or an alumni campaign, and I got to do lots of different storytelling campaigns with different groups. I think I've interviewed over 115 people at KAUST to tell their story, half of which at least have been women, and that's just an absolute honor to tell anyone's story, but particularly the ones that are like those kind of world first underrepresented have been amazing. So the approach has just been aligning to this kind of made up thing, which was strategy pillars, but it was just super simple. Here's some key things that I value that I want this campaign to be. And of course, I got my director to sign off on it at the time, and I brainstormed it with the team. But I think any social team could like write down their pillars in 30 minutes, right? And then it just serves as something to align to.
And I mean, you say that it's a made up thing, but I think that's what we need to do. I mean, it's strategy. You came in with saying, this is what I want the campaign to feel like and demonstrate and show. And I think that's where we all should start, you know? So I applaud that. Not too shabby for a woodworking undergrad from
Right,
Ireland.
right. And I think
I'm I yeah, I'm poking
because
fun, but
I'm a base principles person, right? I have a woodwork teaching degree and organically found my way, no pun intended, into social media storytelling because my grandmother was a good storyteller and my dad was, and I learned from them. And then I just applied, curiosity and this common sense, which it goes out the window a lot of time, which is just, is
it's
this good
so true.
storytelling? Is
Yeah,
this good
yeah.
storytelling? Like we see organizations that we care and people we know, and we look at the content they put out and say, the person putting that out knows it wouldn't make them watch, it wouldn't make them click. Inherently, it's in our DNA to know what good storytelling is. I'm an exemplar of that, having just made it my career from knowing it. Of course, I put in practice. I learned the platforms. I went on YouTube if I needed to figure something out, but the storytelling based principles. And so then when you take like something as complicated as doing like international campaigns for a Saudi university in storytelling, it still just comes back to these key things. Like I want them to be accessible because I value that. I've wrote it down on this page. So now let's just make sure that the campaign is accessible. Let's have the subtitles. Let's do the alt text, whatever it is.
So good. So have you encountered any pushback or challenges in balancing representation with engagement or for engagement?
So I think in terms of pushback, before I had that meeting with the provost, there was some people on my team who were, afraid of change and certainly afraid of like advocating for change to leadership. They just wanted to keep their head down and they were worried for me. But I am just not that sort of person. If I think
I,
there's a better way of doing it, I'll
I love
suggest
it.
it. But I also, with this, model to align to, it wasn't like me saying, picking men is a bad idea. It's like we've got this strategy to align to. So what I would say is, people are not that afraid of change or resistant to change, good people, logical people, if what you're offering achieves their objectives better than the status quo, right? So I just knew what he wanted, and I come in with a plan that made his life easier and said, we're going to avoid these issues and it's going to be better. And then I just put myself in the line and said, just trust me, right? Give me a go and let me deliver it. So I think that's the only real pushback. I'm pushing on a complete open door here though, because Saudi Arabia was undergoing this change. Everybody was celebrating it. It's just an
Mhm.
incredible open country now. The people are so generous. They were loving seeing these stories be told and getting behind them. So it's not been that difficult. I think sometimes the barriers for change, people have put them, in front of themselves, right? And
Hmm.
one one other thing just on that about like advocating for something, I think I, at that time, now I do, I manage quite a big team and a lot of things under that. But at the time, I was like a solo unit. And I did not have the authority to do this, but I took the leadership to do it. And I think we don't necessarily delineate those two often, but there's a difference between authority, which is given and granted from your role, and leadership. So I wanted to lead on these social strategies of human authentic storytelling, on representative and inclusive storytelling, on accessible social media practices. So I just did it. I took that leadership and I advocated. I might need my sponsor, I might need the person with the authority to get behind it to make it happen, but I can do that by taking leadership. And I think sometimes a barrier is we just feel like, well, I don't have the authority to do that. Yes, perhaps, but if you really want to get into that space where, look, let me say, you don't have to have passion and purpose in your job. If your job is just your job and you want to leave at 5 o'clock, I support you, right? But for me, I need that. My job, I want to have it. And so if you're like me and you want to make it your mission to tell underrepresented stories or to do something impactful and make that a mission, you don't need the authority. You just need to care about it. Take the leadership to advocate for that, tie it to something, and find that person with authority that can back you.
Yeah, I think there is such wisdom in that. There, in influence leading without authority, so leading with influence is such an undervalued skill for social media directors, and one that really really goes a long way for us. I agree. So Tony, are there any platforms in particular that you find effective for giving visibility to marginalized groups?
So I think that these storytelling campaigns that I engage in, I'll give an example. We did one on alumni, and I worked with a wonderful former colleague, Lee Sublet, who was the manager of alumni, and we did change makers about alumni out in the world that were really having an impact. And then we did the class of 2021, the class of 2022 with the graduating class, and those that content just performed almost on every channel, right? It was just amazing because we were coming out with this authentic storytelling that just hadn't really been done from the university. And so, yeah, okay, maybe Facebook wasn't that popular, but we resized stuff for Instagram, and we aligned it. What I will say is that since we have a new social strategy now that's been worked very hard on. We've some amazing new talent come into the social team, and they are leading this move to differentiating and really having like an Instagram strategy, really making sure that we don't just slap content across channels. But I think the key thing here in terms of giving visibility is the type of storytelling. So I think when people think about storytelling, sometimes people see something and then they do what they think that thing is, right? And so somebody might see what we've done, and go, they put a student in front of a camera or they put a professor in front of a camera, they had them talk, and they put that on social, right? And then they would do that. But there's a difference in terms of what that article is like or what that video story is like, because some people are not actually telling stories, right? They just have somebody conveying information, right? And
Mm.
it's it's the difference between, and it was a guy, I stole this from a guy called John Azzoni on LinkedIn, this term, but I've been pushing it for years. But this terminology of the difference between narrative and declarative, right? And so
Ah,
the
okay.
videos are declarative. Our university is this. I studied this, right? That's just declaring stuff. Whereas if you actually want to tell somebody's story, you have to get into the narrative, right? What is their story? What's the journey? Right? Aaron Sorkin, when he talks about his writing, he talks about like what the person wants and what is the barrier in their way to get there. And it's just breaks it down as simple as that, right? Like,
Mm.
what are they going for and what's the barrier? And so maybe they haven't overcome it yet if this is like a student video, but they're talking about where they want to go. Or maybe it's the alum who can retrospectively talk about where they wanted to go. And like, that's a narrative. But a lot of people saying, okay, like the recipe is like a student on a camera in a nice location with nice lighting. No, there's some of the recipe, but like the key ingredient of storytelling is the narrative. And if you miss that out, if it's a recipe, your cake's going to suck, it's not going to taste nice.
So that's interesting. So the Aaron Sorkin sort of concept you were talking about is that there's always a challenge. Like for most of us, there's a challenge that we're trying to work through or a goal that we want to
Right.
hit. Is that
He
sort of what we're
he
saying?
actually
Okay.
calls it intention and obstacle. That's the language
Oh,
that he uses. Like, what's
okay.
their intention? So the faculty, you could imagine, my intention is to create a new biosensor that more accurately detects cancer. Right? Like that would be an intention of the professor. And then in the interview, you'd say, well, what's the obstacle? Is it we're working on this? Is it technological? Is it about bandwidth? Is it an engineering thing? If you get into that, those are the core principles of like just good cinematic storytelling, good narrative storytelling. And if you can embed that into telling the stories of those people, be they marginalized groups or just anyone on your campus, those humans that make up institutions, yes, are buildings, but they're also just a collection of people. And telling those stories, if you boil it down to that, like what's the intention and obstacle, that simple principle could really help and be the key ingredient to truly telling narrative stories rather than just declarative information sharing.
Man, that is a great piece of advice right there. From a great storyteller, Tony. You're one of the best storytellers that I've encountered. So thank you for that. Speaking of advice, what other advice would you give to social media managers who want to make a meaningful impact in lifting the voices of underrepresented communities?
Yeah, so I just recap on some of the things. It's like write it down, put those things you care about down on a piece of paper so it's not your opinion. So you're bringing that into the room. I think ask yourself, are you truly telling a story? Are you just being declarative? Are you getting to the narrative? Think about the fact that there's a difference between authority and leadership, and take that leadership. But here's another thing that if you are a good storyteller, have you thought about that you should not just tell stories on your social channel, but you should use stories to enact the change you want within your organization? Are you going into that meeting with a story to tell? Because humans, storytelling is so powerful, right? Like I'll give you this example of a story I tell a lot. You wrote a book, Organic Social Media, right? And so we know that organic social media, there's a type of social media that content that really performs well. And universities, people that run university accounts might be familiar with someone coming in with essentially an ad that they want you to post. They have a piece of marketing that they want posted organically. This should be a dark post. It should have a budget. It should go to the target group, but they want it out on organic social, right? So how are you familiar with this? I'm sure a lot of
Yeah.
listeners are, right? So a few months ago, I went to the cinema in Jeddah, in the nearest city to us here, with my girlfriend to see a movie. And I went to walk in with a cup of tea. I love tea. I'm Irish. We love our tea. And the guy said, "You can't bring tea in here." And I looked over and I said, "That person has tea." And he goes, "Yeah, that's the tea that we sell. That's how we make money, right? So you can't.
Yeah.
We're not going to let you just do your own thing. We have something to sell." And so I tell this story, and then I say, "How does Facebook make money? Do you know?" And they'll say, "Yeah, selling ads." I said, "Right. So do you think Facebook is going to let you just put your ad on our channel for free? They're not going to show it to people. It's going to hurt what we call organic reach, and it's going to impact our engagement rate." So here, I'm taking a story and I'm using it to communicate in work, right? To ensure that we're doing good storytelling on our channels. Like I had another one where we did this day in the life video, and counterintuitively, someone that's not really embedded in it, they saw, or even our faculty campaign, this faculty campaign, right? It was super simple. It was a member of faculty sitting in front of a chair, and I was behind the camera asking questions. And that was it. Backdrop, two cameras, we cut it. And this won awards all around the world, right? And then and we did 4 seasons of it. We're just working on doing another one. And somebody said to me, just the other day, they said, "Oh, but now that we have a bigger team, imagine how good it will be when we have time to go into the professor's labs and shoot all the B-roll and do." And I said, "No, no, 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 you don't get it. That's not going to make it better, right?" And they said, "But if we up the production values," I said, "No, it's going to take away from the thing that's the key
Mm.
ingredient, the
Hmm.
narrative." And it's called faculty in focus because it's just a professor in a chair telling their story, right? So then I use the story about being at this traditional Yemeni restaurant that's in this little village beside the university, and everybody from the university goes there, and it's cheap and it's delicious, and the guys are friendly, and it's an open kitchen that you go in. But the thing is banged up, right? It's got broken chairs, it's got tiles that are cracked,
My
right?
favorite restaurants. Yeah.
And so I say, "Have you been there? Do you know it? Do you love it?" And they're like, "Yeah." And I goes, "Would it be better if all the chairs were perfect and it was bigger and fancier and the kitchen was closed?" And they're like, "No, of course not. It wouldn't be as authentic." And I said, "Boom. Now you understand why our day in the life video is shot on a student's phone rather than a high 4K camera. Now you understand why adding extra stuff to something doesn't always make it better." And I don't blame them, because it can seem counterintuitive if you're not thinking like I am, which is get to the heart of the storytelling, be as authentic as possible. But this is my advice, which is basically, if you're a good storyteller and if you're good at doing that on your channels, bring it into your work and use stories to help enact change, whether that's holding up good practices or walking into, that leadership meeting. Yes, the data works, but pair the data with the story, because we're humans, people are people, and connect it that way.
So brilliant, super insightful. I'm just going to ask this question because I know that there might be a listener out there that's going, "Well, Tony, I'm not as good of a storyteller as you." This is something I think is a muscle that can be exercised. But what would you tell that listener or those listeners?
That's an absolutely great question. And I think the first failure would be to think that it's communication talent. We call it communication skills, right? And we call it skills because they can be developed. And yes, if you're lucky like me, it's like having a privilege that, say, I understand that I had a great mentor in my father that I just observed and soaked in his storytelling. And I come from Ireland, a land of storytelling. But these are actually things that are embedded in every single culture's DNA. And it's really about stripping back all the things that's making you forget. You actually know what good storytelling is. I guarantee it. Every single person listening to this knows what good storytelling is. And the reason a guy with a woodwork teaching degree first went from mixing cement on a building site, being dragged into university through an access program, then dropping out of a psychology PhD, going into student engagement, and then flying to Saudi Arabia. The reason I've been successful at this is because I just take a step back that people aren't, and going, is this good? Is this good storytelling? And I promise you, in your heart, you know the answer.
Preach it. I love that. Take a step back and just ask, is this good? Would I like this content? Would
Right.
I stop scrolling to view this content? Ah, brilliant, Tony. Tony, it's been absolute pleasure, but I cannot let you go before asking you the final question of the podcast is, Tony, what is your confession?
So I love social media. And I think to be really good at it, you have to spend time on those platforms to really know how to leverage them. But since I've moved into a more management position, I now have zero social media apps on my phone. I do not have Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, nothing. I don't even have YouTube on my phone. Now, little bit of a cheat. I have a second phone, which is my work phone, which I turn off at times and I put it away. And I do have some apps there, but I'm just super intentional about going on social media. I want to be, what I've been good at in my career is getting people's attention. Right? That's what these are. They're things that want your attention, and I've been good at that. But there are other places I want to intentionally put my intention, like, spending quality time with my girlfriend, making sure I have good social relationships with my friend, calling my dad to connect back to Ireland, right? I still love spending time on social, but I just don't have it on my phone where I unintentionally get sucked in there. And yeah, that's my confession. A guy that spent at least 15 years since I first ran a social account for work, that I now currently have 0 social apps on my phone.
Brilliant. Hashtag goals, right? Absolutely brilliant. And that's a great reminder to end this conversation on. Everyone, after you listen to this podcast, go call your dad.
Yes.
Tony,
Yeah.
Tony, it's been an absolute pleasure. And I'm telling you, I learn something from you, and I repeat your stories to other people. Like every time we talk, I learn something from you. So thank you.
And likewise. And thank you so much for having me.
Confessions of a Higher Ed Social Media Manager is part of the Enrollify podcast network. If you like this podcast, chances are you'll like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a plethora of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Our shows help higher ed marketers and admissions professionals find their next big idea and feature a selection of the industry's best as your hosts. Learn from Jamie Hunt, Allison Tercio, Mallory Wilsey, and so many others of your favorite leaders in higher ed. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.